So React's dying, right? No. Yeah. Look at these states. Look at these surveys that we had last year. React is constantly losing interest. So we have other frameworks now. They are fancy, they are new, they are shiny, and we want to use other frameworks. But why? Why want to use other frameworks? Just to update the UI. We just want to do a simple thing. Update the UI. Why we want to study other frameworks? Why we have React? And also, you see, the last release, official release of React is 1 year ago, July 2022. So React is definitely dying. No, it's not true. But when we look at the frameworks out there, and when we are at the beginning of a project and we are trying to choose between React and another front-end framework, we need to know what's the difference. Main differences between React and other frameworks. And I wanted to do this talk because I want to show you some of the main differences between React and others, just to give you more information and let you be more more informed when you have to take decisions and when you want to be involved into discussions and talk with others about React and others. So React was created in 2013, so we know or should know that it is a library, or it uses a library approach, and it has virtual DOM, and it introduced this syntax called JSX. And to compare React to other frameworks, I chose to build an app. Starting from the same requirement, I built an app with 10 different frameworks. I cannot show you all 10 frameworks because it takes too much time. I already tried that, didn't go well. So I chose four or five of them. And I want to show you the app. The app is this one. It's an RSS reader, basically. So you want to have the feed sources. So you are a user, so you want to have your feed sources. You want to be able to add new sources or remove existing sources. And then you have your feed list, okay? So we have the 10 latest feeds mixed from our sources. And we can add favorites, add an item as a favorite. So we have a state. And also we have a state here because we want to be able to, for example, no, let's do this. For example, I will copy this and I remove this. So wired, the wired feed disappears, then I add it back, and React feed is there. So perfect. This is my app. And this is a very simple app, but it covers lots of concepts, like, for example, the rendering and the state management. So let's go back to the presentation and see the code. So on the right, you see the template. And on the left, you see the business logic. Not all the logic of the component, but just some of them. And the most important concept when you think of the rendering process of React is that each component, when React renders a component, gets executed. We are in the context of a functional component here, right? So we have a component as a function. And when React wants to render a component, it executes the function, the entire component, top to bottom. And the return value of this component is the virtual DOM that we have. It's similar to HTML, but it's not. It's like very similar, but it's a virtual DOM that gets committed to the real DOM in the process, in the cycle. So React is constantly cycling, and when the component is dirty, so that when the props changed or the state of the component changed, then React re-renders the component. That means that it will re-execute the entire component's function. So you have to remember that, because if you put business logic inside your component, you know that when React will re-render the component, it will execute all the logic that you have. So if you put in expensive logic in there, it will get re-executed. How to avoid that? Of course, you have to memorize functions. And React gives you opportunity to memorize functions. And also to add state to functional components that are stateless by default. State in React is managed using hooks. So we have useState hook here, and the useState hook, I don't know if you really dived into how the useState hook works, but it's more or less like having two arrays, one for the values and one for the setters. And each time React iterates, so for every new cycle, it gives you the value, the first value on the stack. And when you set a new value, it calls the setter. So it's an array. React doesn't have the concept of knowing which value is related to this use state. It's just ordered. It's just a stack. It's just an array. Okay. So this is the number 0 value. This is number 1 value. That's why you cannot use conditional. You cannot use hooks into conditional statements. Okay, because React needs to know the order of the use state calls. Then we can see reactivity here. We can see that we are calling a function, a callback, fetch feeds, because we want to fetch the content of our feeds, but only when one of the dependencies changes. So for example, we have feeds here, which is our feed state, the list of our feeds, and fetch feeds. Well, fetch feeds is a function, so it will never change. But feeds will change. So when feeds changes, the callback, the content of the use effect will get called. Perfect. And fetch feeds is a callback because, if you remember, every time I set a new feed here, these are the default values. If I set a new value here, if I add a new value here, this will get called, the entire component will be called again. So if I don't use callback here, if I don't add the use callback here, this function will get re-executed again. So how do React know to not call this function? Because React will memorize this function, and this will be called only if this dependency, this feeds value will change. So that's how React works in practice, okay? And we can use this as a reference to compare other frameworks. And for example, we can see, I will show you briefly. This one is React, okay? It's the same app, so I will not interact with it, but it works, okay? It works the same way. Let's look at how React works. Oh, sorry. Yeah, you can manage the state in a more complex way. You can use, if you really need to, you can use other state management. I don't think you should most of the time, but you can. You can use Redux, you can use Zustand, you can use React Query, which is one of my favorite ways to manage state, because you can manage the state in the server. So I think it's an approach that I would like to suggest to you, or you can use React context, but that's not the point. Let's talk about Preact. Preact was created by Jason Miller in 2015, and it's 100% compatible with React with a layer of compatibility. It has a virtual DOM, it's smaller, it's faster, but it's switched from hooks to signals. And so we can compare how signals work instead of using useState and other hooks. So this is the code for the same app that we saw before. We have the virtual DOM here, that's more or less the same than React. And then here we have the logic. You see that the syntax is very similar to what we saw in React. We have use signal for declaring our state, so we use default values here, and we can set new values when we fetch and when we want to set new items. We can set a new value using this syntax, items.value, and we can set a new value into the signal. But see that here we are calling use signal effect without dependencies. Why? Because I don't need to worry about re-renders of this component, because I'm not using hooks here. So the component state will never change. I'm using signals here. So think of signals like almost like a different framework. Like I'm setting values inside these signals, but the component state doesn't change. I'm just changing the signals. So if I add new items into my signals, the component state will not change, and so it will not get re-rendered. But signals notifies the nodes into my virtual DOM, the nodes that are watching, that are subscribed to the signals. So here, for example, here we are cycling on my items value, so the items that I fetched, I'm cycling here, I'm adding a map here. So every time items changes, I'm re-rendering this part, because only this part is affected by the items change. So not the entire component, and not the entire component tree, but just this node, because items is just changing here. So I don't need to tell this effect to watch for dependencies, because it will be called just one time, just when the component renders the first time, when it gets mounted, okay? And that's the same for fetch feeds. I don't need to memorize this function or use callback or whatever. I just define the function as an async function, and I'm sure it will not get called again when for other re-renders, because the component will not get re-rendered. So I just write plain JavaScript and set my signals value. I want to talk more about signals using the example that we saw last night. But first, since I want to compare signals to state, but also to another pattern, I want to talk about Angular first. And Angular was created by Miško Hevari, the creator of Quick, in 2016. Of course, AngularJS in 2009. It heavily uses TypeScript. It's opinionated. It's heavily opinionated. And Angular is more suitable for complex projects. When you have many components, or when you want to use OOP principles, for example, in your team. And Angular is a good choice. And this is very different from React in terms of user experience and also on the syntax. But this is the app, okay? In Comic Sans, because it's Angular, okay? But it works the same. So I can copy this one, I can remove this one. I removed all the wired feeds. I add this, and I get the feeds again, and I can favorite this. So it works. Let's see the code. Code is a bit more complex here, because in Angular, first of all, when you want to write business logics, and my business logic here is fetching feeds, fetching items from feed. Okay, if I want to write business logic, I don't put business logic into my components, because I want to separate responsibilities, okay? So my component is only responsible for rendering. And fetching is something that I want to do in a different class, because Angular is made of classes. I want to do the fetching part in a different class. And this class is a service. So you see that when I declare my component in Angular, I declare it with a decorator, because Angular works with decorators. So I want to decorate my component with the aComponent decorator, telling Angular that the template is this file, the style is this file, and then I declare the properties, my feeds, other properties, and you see that here I'm declaring a subject, feed item subject. And when I want to get feeds items, I declare it as an observable, and I return this with a getter. So my template will be able to access this property with his getter and will have an observable back. Here we have other logic, but I want to show you the fetch service. This is the fetch service, so I'm fetching here from my URL. You see that this is another object with this constructor. You see that when I fetch from using the Angular module HTTP client, I'm using get from the URL, and I'm mapping something, and I'm returning an object, okay? This one is an observable. And in my component, when I want to show what's inside my feeds list, I subscribe to the feed items observable. Remember that feed items is this thing, so it's a getter on my observable. And on the component, I subscribe with the pipe async syntax to the observables. So every time I get new items from this variable, from this observable, I will rerun this part of the component. So you saw three different patterns for managing states and reactivity and templates and re-renderings. But I came up with an example yesterday evening. I don't know if it works, but I will try. So to explain signals to you and observable. So signals, imagine that you have a glass. This is a glass. You have a variable, okay? You have a value, and you put the value inside. This is the setter. You set the value inside this signal. So the signal is the glass, and the value, you set the value inside the glass. So if you subscribe to this glass, you are watching inside the glass. When you get the value, you are simply looking inside and get the current value. At any time, if you ask me what's in the glass, I look inside it and I get the value at any time. It's a synchronous operation, okay? I look inside and I have my value. If someone else sets a new value inside my glass, I will get notified. I will get, I don't know, a sound coming from it, and I'm notified that the value changes. And I look inside and I get the new value, okay? And I can pass this value around. This value is a reference, by the way, but it's not important. But if you have an observable instead, you should, I don't have a pipe here, but imagine I have a pipe, okay? I have a pipe. And on the other side of the pipe, there's you, that you are watching inside the pipe. If you're watching inside the pipe, you are subscribed to the pipe. So you are waiting at the end of the pipe for something to come out. If I ask you, what's the value of this observable, you are not able to respond to me until something comes out. You have the concept of time here. This is an asynchronous operation. You are waiting for something. If I throw something inside the pipe, you will receive it, and when you receive it, you get the value. So it's an asynchronous operation. And also, in the middle, I can put modifiers in my pipe to modify the result. That's what I'm doing here. I'm using this map as a modifier, okay? I'm modifying what I'm getting from the source with another function. I hope this example was good. It was? Okay. So let's see another framework, which is very, very, very new, shiny. It was created by Rich Harris, which, by the way, doesn't love React and the virtual DOM. It's compiler-based, so it means that you have, when you write your code, and then a compiler builds your code and ships JavaScript and HTML to the browser. And reactivity and state management are built in. Let's see what an app built with Svelte looks like. Of course, it's very similar. It's always my app. And it's the same. I can remove sources, and I can add favorites. Look at my graphic abilities. Okay. And Svelte is supported by Vercel. Okay, but let's look at the code. This code is a bit different, okay? We have something that looks closer to HTML, okay? I would say it's just plain HTML with something more. And the logic, the business logic of the component is a bit different because I can use state management APIs that's built in Svelte. And this API is writable, and I also have readable. But for this example, I need writable because I need to be able to write into my state. With readable, I only read. But with writable, I write. So I define my feeds, my items, and I want to write into them. And these are reactive properties. So when someone writes inside my feeds, the component, or inside my items, for example, this component will react to the change in items using this syntax with the $sign, okay? This makes items reactive. So I have my function to fetch my items and my function to add feeds. When I want to update this store, because this is a store, I want to update feeds. For example, I call feeds.update and add new feeds. With update, I take what it is, what's inside, and add new values. With set, I set new values. So here, when I fetch something from the server, I set new values. So I completely set whatever is inside this. And items being reactive will update my component. So you see that the syntax is pretty different, but the concepts are not that different. The thing is, I'm not re-rendering the component because I'm just using reactivity to update the nodes in my HTML that are changing. Now let's see Solid. Solid was created by Ryan Carniato in 2018. It's component-based, and he has reactivity with signals. Maybe it was one of the first to have reactivity with signals. Let's see what it is. Okay, this is Solid because they are more, more fancy. Like they are solid. They are cool. But it works. So if I favorite items, they work. I can remove. Okay, everything's working fine. And let's see the code. So this is, I would say, more similar to what we saw on Preact with create signals. And the syntax is a bit different, but the concepts are the same. So I have a signal that I can create passing default values, initial values. And then when I want to add new values, to set new values inside my signal, I just call set articles here. Yeah, because that's different than not Preact, the other one. But that's a bit different because with create signal here, I have two values, the getter and the setter, and I have to call the setter to set what's inside my signal. So I'm calling set articles here when I get new articles and set the value of my signals. And when I want to look inside my glass, my bucket, I have to call the feeds with the parentheses. So for example, where's the feed here? Well, for example, here, articles here, this is another signal, and I'm calling this article with the parentheses, so it's like the getter, okay? This is becoming the getter, so I'm getting what's inside the article signal. And I'm reacting to changes, so when articles changes, again, I'm re-rendering only this part of the DOM, only what's inside this. The same for favorites and the same for everything else. And so that's where it differentiates this than React. Again, I'm not re-rendering the entire component. I'm just rendering the part that changed. I don't know how much time I have left. 10 minutes? You don't know. 10 minutes. Okay. Okay. So I hope you get some of the differences that we have now in the front-end frameworks world. We have React, which has, I think it has a good ecosystem, a good developer experience, a good community. So when you want to choose a framework, I think you shouldn't only check the code or check the documentation. Documentation is really important, but that's not the only thing. You have to look at the whole thing, the community, the ecosystem, your other teammates. What are they using? You cannot just come up with I'm using Solid.js starting by now. No, there are things that you have to consider. But I wanted to give you a better understanding, I hope, of what's the current state of the frameworks world, okay? And I could do the same with other frameworks. I created the same app with all these other frameworks, but I don't have the time to show you the code. So you have Vue created in 2014, which is, I think it's beginner friendly. You have two APIs now, by the way, for declaring components. You have option API, composition API, which is different, but I think it's a good way to start. If you never start with the framework, Vue, it's a good choice. You also have Quick. That's, you saw it before. And you have Lit. Lit lets you create web components. So it's a framework created by Google to let you create web components. So if you need web components and you don't want to write them from scratch, Lit is a good choice. Using 15 minutes, okay. So with lit, you can use TypeScript and decorators syntax to declare components. And you also have reactivity and, of course, scoped CSS. And the same with Stencil. With Stencil, you can create web components. If you're more into the Ionic world, so you're using Ionic framework, or you're more familiar with the Angular-like syntax, then Stencil is a good choice for creating web components. And also, one thing that I find interesting is that Stencil incorporates unit and end-to-end tests built into the framework. But I want to show you one last framework that I think is really maybe one of my favorites. One of the top frameworks that you can choose today to create the same app from the same requirements that we saw before today. And it is JavaScript. JavaScript was created by Brendan Eich in 1995. The original name was Mocha, actually. It is not related to Java. It is fully optimized and compatible with all major browsers. It's imperative, it's declarative, it's functional, it's object-oriented, and it's event-driven. It has a robust ecosystem. It has tons of libraries, interoperable with frameworks, rich built-in API, and it's supported by W3C. And actually, I have the demo. This is my app. So let's go back to the 90s. This is our app. My graphic abilities. But let's see if it works. So let's copy this source. So I see wired here. I remove wired, wired disappears. I add wired back, and is here. And I also can favor it. Yes. It's working. It's the same app, but built with vanilla JavaScript. I have proof. This is the code. Look at how simple, how wonderful is this code. It's just plain HTML. So you write your HTML and you write your placeholders here to get your data and display your data here. And this is the code. Let's start from here. You declare your variables. That's your state, your component state, your feeds. Then you fetch feed. It's don't look at the quality of this code, but it's good. It works, okay? So I'm fetching my feed, and then when I fetch the feed, I just push feeds into my items, which is an array declared, okay? And when I finish fetching, I just call this function render items, my rendering function. So let's see what render items is doing. It's just creating new elements, new DOM elements, and appending elements, adding things and appending elements to the document. I can also create other elements, okay? And in the end, I can append this child to the doc. So I can also add the new feeds, creating function for add feeds. I can remove feeds. This is the function to populate the feeds list, just appending childs. And in order to be reactive, I just add the event listeners. So if you add the event listeners, and also you can add the event listeners wherever you want. So you can react to what the user is doing. So when the user clicks on the add feed button, I just call the add feed function. So it will get called. I will call fetch feeds. Fetch feeds will populate my feed. We call render, and the render process, it's there. So it works. It's not, maybe it's not a fancy framework, but I swear to you that this is working and the reactivity is there. Well, I'm just joking, but you see, if you have to just write simple logic to display something on your UI, maybe you don't need to look into new frameworks, but just using plain old JavaScript. So I'm Edo. You can find me online. These are my handlers. So you can find me. If you like how I tell stories, you can find me on YouTube and on Spotify and listen to my podcasts. I'm a developer relations engineer at Sparfabric. We are a company in Milan. We are a consultancy company. We do custom development and cloud native. So you can follow us. And this is for my Italian friends. seguiteci, Continuous Delivery Podcast, prossime puntate fortissime. And thank you. This... With this QR code, you will go to the joined in site. You can rate my talk, and also I added the slides. So you will find the slides inside my joined in talk. So thank you very much again.
Oh, what are we doing? What are we doing? Hey, what a great talk. What a lovely talk. It was a great catch-up for multiple things in the ecosystem. We have 5 minutes for questions. Where are the questions? I know there's a question. There's at least one question.
Everything was clear, so...
It was so clear.
No need for questions.
There's a question right there. Damn it, it's not that clear.
What was the most, which of the frameworks was the most fun to work with for you? Personally?
Fun? Well, fun, vanilla JavaScript is fun. Fun in terms of, I found it easy to work with and enjoyable. I think, well, we all love React, but I think Svelte is a good choice for this kind of app, because with few lines of code, you can come up with reactivity, state management, and the HTML is pretty simple. So I think it was the one that took me the less time to write. So if you have a really simple app, maybe using Svelte is a good decision. It's a good choice.
Svelte.
Yeah.
Any other questions? How do you feel about Vue? That's my question. Have you tried Vue?
Yeah, I tried Vue. Vue was actually my first framework. So when I entered the front-end world, Vue was my first framework. Vue was the first, Angular was the second. I think I love Vue. I think it's strange. The syntax of Vue is pretty strange. But if you, I don't know, I like it because I knew it from the beginning. And now the new composition API is pretty much straightforward. If you know React or Angular, it's straightforward to use also Vue. I don't know, I think you have, I don't know if you know how Vue works, but you have one file with everything inside. Okay, it's pretty simple to manage the logic because you have just to look at one file. You have all your properties, all your options, and you look at what's happening. It's not so difficult. So I think I love the simplicity of Vue.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Yes, right there. Yeah. Wait, man. There's a mic coming.
So leaving aside Angular, React, and Vue, the other ones, do you think they are actually ready, like mature enough, and their ecosystem to be used in an hypothetical big enterprise project, or is it still better to stick with the old and well-known Angular, React frameworks?
Like the new ones, like Quick or Astro?
No, like Svelte and Solid.
Like Svelte and Solid?
Yeah.
Okay. I think they are mature enough. They are not so young. By the way, Svelte was created in 2018. Wow. Svelte in 2016. Wow. So they are not so new. And I think they're mature enough to be used. I think when you have to select your framework, you don't need to just think about what you like. You have to think about what's around you. So who are you working with? What's the use case? Where will you deploy this framework? So, and I don't know, you have to put everything inside your list and come up with your ideas. Not just, I love this framework, so I really want to use this one. No, there are other things to consider, okay? But if you ask me if these are mature enough, I think yes, they are mature enough.
So if you were like, go for Svelte, you think you would not eventually regret maybe your decision?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Of course, the ecosystem, the ecosystem with libraries that you have in React is huge. You don't have so many libraries in Svelte, but in the end, I don't think these frameworks, in my opinion, are meant to be used in a small in a small context. Okay, one of my favorite patterns is like micro frontends. Okay, so having smaller apps, front-end apps. Okay, so you have to be small, and then you don't need lots of dependencies, lots of libraries, but just the framework. You just have to put I love to put my state management on the server. I love to put my business logic on the server and use the front end just to update UI. It's just what I want to do.
Okay.
Okay. So you can totally use Svelte, Solid, whatever you want.
Okay.
Quick is a different thing because Quick has different patterns and different approaches. So with Quick, you do different things, I guess. It's not a replacement, a one-on-one replacement for Svelte, for example. But the others are pretty much the same.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Well, hey, thank you. Let's give it up one more time, everybody, for Edoardo. That's all the time we have. Amazing. So good. So good.